You've just found Supernormal M. It's my little place where I get to follow my curiosities. And, by the way, don't worry, there is no AI used from top to bottom over here. So if that matters to you, maybe you'd like to stay and listen. I'm starting off a little bit traditional with a post from Reddit. Now, I did scan it for authenticity, and I gathered that this gal is the real deal. This was cemented with their reply, ain't no thing but a chicken wing. Just so you know, there's details beneath the video to jump forward to anything you might be curious about yourself. So without any further ado, we start our evening now. Welcome to a strange place. I worked as a wilderness therapy guide for a primitive living skills program, spending weeks at a time leading kids through the backcountry, teaching survival skills and making sure no one wandered off into oblivion. Every morning, my supervisor, Jay, sent GPS coordinates for the next campsite. We would pack up our packs and move. I never knew exactly where we were headed until I got the text. Except for this place. This was the only site I'd memorized, just so I could avoid it. It was beautiful, sure. A massive boulder at the top of a very large, gradually sloping knoll that overlooked a valley. The earth was deep red clay that had been speckled with large hunks of alabaster. Plenty of juniper trees provided shade and anchor for setting up a shelter. The soft red sand made for easy sleeping, and the large sage bushes provided a wealth of useful items. A wash of cottonwood trees stretched down to the east, and the distance was framed by pink and white mountain ridges. It was a visually stunning sight, but something about it set off what I call my dog vibe. That deep primal instinct that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I don't like to admit it, but I can be a huge whiny baby. I'm tall, I'm built like a brick shithouse. Spent my days hiking miles through brutal desert terrain. I felt tough, but in this place, it made me feel bite-sized. I'd spent one sleepless night at the site prior. There was something that gave the air a heavy feeling. The surrounding geological structures created a strange impact on sound. This was the one location in the field where sounds would become heavily distorted. After setting foot in this place for the first time, I drew a big red X over the site on my map. I jotted down the direct coordinates, so I could avoid this place later down the line. Nothing exceptional happened the first night. It was just my dog vibe sort of telling me to run. That morning, I sat by the fire. I was boiling water with pineapple skins for tea. That sounds good. That's when my GPS pinged. I checked the coordinates that I had sent to my inReach, from just the degrees that I knew. I didn't even need to write the minutes and seconds. I dreaded where we were going. My supervisor had sent a message with the coordinates. Sorry, dude, I know. That stinky motherfucker. I showed my co-staff Steve the screen. He took one look and busted out laughing. What'd you do to piss Jay off? Jay, our direct supervisor, was a good buddy of ours. After calling the office to request a location change, I was informed that apparently we'd been hiking too fast, catching up with other groups. So they had to divert us. There was really no other choice. And of course, we got sent straight to my least favorite place. The hike was a mild 8 miles, but by the time we arrived, the sun was setting, casting streaks across the technicolor clouds above the horizon, and the warm October air rustled the treetops. We set up camp beneath a cavernous rocky outcrop at the apex of this hill. The campsite was a little less than a mile from the nearest service road. By the time we had finished setting up the camp, the kid shelter, staff shelters, the fire pit, and the sump, we chose a safe location to hang our food bags for the night. It was time to get the kiddos set up for a nice hot meal. Every individual made their own food, but the food was always better hot. Only on the worst nights would he go to bed without a fire, and I would never stay at this site without one. The boys were absolute powerhouses when it came to a firewood collection, which made my life easier. We had a perfect system. Every night each person would try to find and carry as much wood as you can physically carry. The winner would get a lead on her next hike the next day. We were so efficient at collecting wood that every morning we had to scatter the pile as an LNT, like leave no trace measure, which earned staff bonus pay if done correctly. And at that point in my life, I'd do almost anything for a few extra bucks. The wood was collected, camp was set, and as the sun dipped deeper behind the mesas and the horizon, the boys started busting a coal for the fire. The only sound was the high-pitched screech of a bow drill. It was filling the air. That was when I felt it. The eyes. This part of the desert was full of life. Elk, deer, coyotes, raccoons, and small rodents. No cattle, though. They never came out this far. I figured it was some scavenger waiting to comb the desert sands for dinner scraps. The night moved along, and we had all just sat down to feast on our dinner and talk about our days. Part of the program was telling a fable or a parable at some point in the day and having a group discussion about it. After everyone had finished cleaning their pots and hanging their pristinely packed food bags high in the trees, we stoked the fire and began our group discussion. At this point, the world would have been engulfed in darkness. We could only do, or rather see, what the fire was illuminating. It was during this time that I felt an exceptional increase in that feeling of being watched. I stared once we put our bags down, but this was too much. I slowly scanned the surroundings to find the source of my unease. My eyes landed on a large sagebrush. It was a distance from the fire, but it was directly in front of me. Then I saw them. A pair of eyes peering from behind a sagebush, the firelight reflecting in the pupil. Yes, Coco. Only they weren't animal eyes. They were human. Adrenaline slammed into my chest. That was a real-life person watching me, watching Steve, watching my kids. I launched myself across the fire into the bush, flailing my arms and yelling as low, deep, and loudly as I could. After assaulting the poor shrubbery, Jay rolled out from behind the bush in stitches. And motherfucker, he had parked his Jeep 2 miles away and hiked in just to scare me. And it worked. I wasn't laughing. In fact, I became a little bit of a spoilsport as I berated him for his poor life choices. I had to, he told the boys. This is their least favorite sight. I couldn't resist. We spent the rest of the night joking around. The kids cackling because they could never imagine what I would do when I was scared. After a while, the little dudes went to sleep, and Steve, Jay, and I stayed by the fire, discussing the group's progress. Then, around 1 a.m., Steve went to bed and Jay turned to me. You want to go on a little hike? We walked 30 minutes up a ridge, following the service road to a little vista overlooking the entire valley. The desert stretched out below, reflecting silver in the waxing gibbous moonlight. Jay, being Jay, pulled out a pack of contraband cigarettes. Massive no-no in the field. But I was a filthy nicotine rat and not about to say no. If my supervisor wanted to give me contraband, well, fine by me. We sat on a rock, backs to the road. We were lighting up. We talked about everything while taking long drags. We were on our second cancer stick when from down the hill we saw headlights. A pair of round white-yellow lights appeared over a ridge, climbing the incline 500 yards away. There was something about this set of lights that sent my dog vibe into hyperdrive. There was a pit in my stomach, but I thought it was just the anxiety of being caught red-handed with a cigarette. At this hour, it could only be a few things. And assuming from the headlight shape, it looked like a Jeep. It was probably the vehicle of a hunter scoping for the best spot to land their tag, or someone lost. I remembered that it couldn't have been a company vehicle. We would have known if the company's transport vehicles were coming out to meet us, so the anxiety should have left at this point. But it was just increasing ever so slightly. Something was off. The car wasn't making a sound. No engine, no tires on dirt, no brakes squeaking. And in the desert, you could hear everything. The lights gradually floated forward, stopping 50 yards away. We shielded our eyes against the glare. We kept smoking. If it was someone from our company out this late, they would have been one of our friends and wouldn't care. But maybe it was just somebody in need of needed directions. Then, as we got up to walk toward them, the lights moved back, still 50 yards away. We kept approaching, but the distance between us and the car stayed exactly the same. We paused our advance, taking in what we were looking at, and noticed the road curved left, descending down the hill. But the headlights, they were dead ahead. They were not following the road. This vehicle was not following the road. I started to become angry. This area was known for its cryptobiotic soil, and it's known that you tiptoe on the crypto if you have to touch it at all. How could somebody be so obtuse that they would obliterate a colony of microorganisms that have been building its fortress for decades, up to hundreds of years? I regained focus of what was happening and waved my arms to signal the vehicle to stop. I looked down at where we were standing to see if maybe they had lost the road backing up. I wanted to follow the tire tracks to see if any damage was done. And where we were standing now, the headlights had been. I focused on the ground, but I only saw Jay and my footprints from our earlier hike. No tread tires and no marks. Jay saw what I was doing, tried to scan the surrounding ground for tread prints. As we were doing this, the lights didn't move. In fact, they hovered perfectly still. There was something about the situation. It might have been related to my prior adrenaline dump earlier in the evening, and that's where I felt the most dread and impending doom I have ever felt. Tears started flowing from my eyes, but I had no way to control them. I wasn't sad. Maybe it was because of the fear. I grabbed Jay's arm and he looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We were each planning what to do in our own heads, thoughts moving far too quickly to try to say something out loud. Then the lights split apart. One veered left, the other right. They drifted slowly into the open desert, bobbing slightly up and down as they faded. The desert swallowed them whole. After standing in silence, acknowledging that we had both seen it, and we weren't insane, we turned back toward camp, hyper-vigilant as hell. As we passed the spot where the light had vanished, a startling large owl seemed to materialize out of the dark and swooped silently over our heads. Jay flinched hard. Ha! Fucker! I believe this was the universe paying him back. I'd never seen him react like that. I wasn't scared of animals, but Jay looked like he'd just seen a ghost. The chatting that we had been doing prior to seeing the owl had ended. We made it back to camp in silence. I crawled into my bag next to a snoring Steve, and Jay grabbed his pack and set up his little nook fairly close to ours. I don't remember drifting into sleep, but I do remember waking up to the sounds of Scrub Jay's chirping in the trees above us. In the early morning before the kiddos woke up, Jay, Steve, and I roused the fire before it was time to send Jay on his way. As the gentle woman I am, I walked Jay back to his Jeep. Once we were far enough from camp, I broke the silence. What in the actual fuck happened last night? Jay didn't laugh. I've seen some weird shit before, he admitted. 4 years in the field, and yeah, I'm superstitious as hell. I'm just glad we got back in one piece. But I can see why you don't like it here. That's when he told me about owls. They're an omen of death, but not bad luck necessarily, at least in my culture. I reached forward and I gave him a quick hug while saying, "Well, thanks for coming out last night, man, and I'm sorry for launching myself before I realized who you were." He laughed, remembering how he provoked me to Hulk smash a sagebush, and that eased the tension. After a few minutes of joking, we parted ways. There was another week of hiking till I finished my shift, but it was uneventful and nothing strange or weird happened. I still think about this every now and then, but I never really stopped wondering. There were no tire tracks. There was no sound. Just lights in the desert that shouldn't have been there. And if you want to read another story about the time I almost pooped my pants in the Utah desert, you can click here, which I believe is the next story. So buckle up. This happened a while ago, but I still think about it. I moved to the Utah desert in my early 20s to work as a wilderness therapy trail staff. It was a nomadic, primitive living program, so no base camps or modern comforts. We carried everything on our backs, relying on handmade packs, tarps, and whatever we could physically manage over 5 or 15 miles worth of a hike across brutal terrain. We were in the middle of nowhere backcountry, nothing for miles, just under 3,000 square miles. We even had to gather supplies for our own bow drill kits to start fires. Some of us had hand drill kits too, but the blisters were never worth it. Shifts lasted anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. We were responsible for the campers 24/7. One of our duties was the 3 a.m. spot check. Every night, one staff member had to wake up, physically confirm every camper was accounted for, and send a GPS ping to the office as a sort of safety check. If the check was missed, the office was supposed to call at 4:30 a.m., but they never did. Figures. It was not a favorable position to be in, so I always volunteered. You'd physically have to get up out of your sleeping bag and walk around to ensure every head was counted. No one wanted this job, but it was an extra $5 and, well, really added up. The staff were a really tight-knit group of dinguses, and we all loved each other. We would divide tasks fairly between staff and a group. We were all close, and I was especially close with our direct supervisor, Jay. And this will be useful later on, by the way. It was midwinter. That's when I got assigned to the adult group, the only 18-plus camp in the program. Also happened to be co-ed. This meant some special requirements, like separate boys and girls camp, and this being a specific distance from our main camp. My friend Dave and I were stoked to be paired up, and with the adults, that meant less drama and more freedom to do cool things, like challenging hikes. We planned a route to a remote, technicolored hill deep in a red sand pit. It'd be a perfect campsite with tree cover and enough space to separate the boys and girls camps. After a week of hiking, we arrived. The nearest service road, I'm talking backcountry, barely a road kind of a road, was half a mile away, and approached the hill from one direction. One way in, one way out situation for driving in supplies for the weekend. The company's transport vehicles would bring our food and water over this weekend. That night after setting up camp, Dave and I stayed up late with a few campers, making a terrible attempt at wilderness desserts. Once the campers went to bed, we planned for the next day, put out the fire, and turned in. Then came 3 a.m. When I woke up for my spot check, something felt off. The camp wasn't just quiet, it was dead silent. No wind, no distant coyotes. No rustling trees, or even the sounds of scavengers searching for crumbs from our dinner in the sump. Just an unnatural, suffocating stillness. Snow fell in slow motion. the stars reflecting off each flake. I didn't need a light because the soft white blanket was illuminated with the celestial glow. I started my midnight check. The girls' camp was intact. All 4 campers asleep where they should be. Then I walked the 150 yards towards base camp, only hearing my own breath and the sound of my chacos crunching the snow. Once in base camp, I bent down to check the fire pit. The coals were buried under ash and fresh snow, but I moved a small patch aside and saw them still glowing, which would make morning fire prep easier. Then I heard it, a man's voice. It was calling my name. It came from the boys' camp. The voice was deep, and it was carrying through the silence. My mind raced to place it. Not one of the campers, and not Dave. I figured Dave was messing with me. People thought I wasn't scared of anything, which really wasn't true. I just looked like I wasn't. But I headed toward the voice anyway. I was convinced it was a joke. At the boys' camp, I went straight to Dave's shelter, to call his bluff. I shook his shoulder. No response. I climbed into his shelter and pressed a hand to his carotid artery, and just to be sure he wasn't dead. He had a palpable pulse, but no movement. His thoracic cavity was barely moving from his breath. And this was the same guy who'd wake up at a twig snapping, who snored like a chainsaw, yet now he was utterly silent. I even tried a sternum rub. Nothing. Uneasy, I checked the 4 male campers. All accounted for, all asleep, all breathing. Then, from beyond the campsite, my name, again. The voice came from down the hill. The only way out was the far more distant service road behind us. Whatever was calling me wasn't standing on a road, and it wasn't supposed to be there. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my earlobes, and my butthole felt like it was in my throat. The snow kept falling, weightless. Time felt sluggish. Then, one last time, my name again from behind the tree line. It was louder now and closer. I felt a slight wave of relief when I remembered Jay was on shift. Pulled out the inReach and sent Jay a message. "Hey, you here? Come say hi." If he was messing with me, he'd own up to it quickly with a, "Ah, you got me." But no reply came. I power walked back to my shelter, buried myself in my sleeping bag, and clenched my eyes shut. As the first hints of daylight softened the sky, I finally slipped into sleep. A few hours later, I woke up. No one was awake yet, so I collected my store of dry firewood I'd hidden in my shelter the night before, went off to start the morning fire. About half an hour later, Dave emerged from the trees, rubbing his eyes and pulling on his jacket. He sat in silence for a long time. I'd assumed he was contemplating breakfast, and finally he piped up. "Hey, dude, did you have a weird dream last night?" "No, but boy, do I have a story. You first, or me." He wanted to hear mine, so I told him everything. The silence, the falling snow, his corpse of a body, the voice calling my name again and again from the dark. He listened wide-eyed, and when I finished, he said, "In my dream, the group woke up, but we couldn't find you. We called Jay, and he came with search and rescue. All they found was a trail of deer prints leading from your shelter into the woods, but that was it." We sat there stunned, me still processing what he had said in my slightly sleep-deprived delirious state. We were quiet until the first camper came out and sat with us. I checked my inReach. Jay had finally responded. He wasn't anywhere near us. He was back in town at the office all night. The campers woke and we got on with our day, pushing the unease aside. The rest of the shift was uneventful, which is always good in the wilderness. The director of the program even showed up once to have dinner with us and play some games. It was one of the better shifts I remember being out there. When shift change arrived, we said our goodbyes, but before we left, one of the campers pulled me aside. I'm really glad you didn't go missing. I had a weird dream one night that first week. I woke up and I saw you walking into the woods. I tried to scream for you, but I couldn't make a sound. There was a strange man calling your name. That last stretch before transport felt endless. Well, I've worked many shifts since then, but I've never been closer to shitting my pants in my adult life. Once I got back to the office, I noticed that the director of the program had left me a note in my cubby. I guess Dave spoke with him the day he came to visit and told him about his dream and my spooky situation. The director was notorious for being highly superstitious and had left me a little pathway mantra tied to a necklace made of hollowed-out juniper seed called ghost beads. This was one of the many unexplained situations out in the desert that I encountered. But nothing so far has kept me from spending as much time as I can sleeping under the stars. Edit for typos. Thanks. Next, we have a few more stories I gathered before Reddit banned me 3 times, and I still don't know why. Hope to be back there soon so I can walk about and find you guys the most interesting people I happen to come across. If you work for Reddit or know something beyond what I know, feel free to reach out to me. But let's check these out. The Thing in My House. Hey guys, I made a post on here about a week ago, talking about a mimic in my house. And ever since then, there's been physical things happening in my home. Last Saturday, my mom and stepdad were in the living room watching TV when they heard a pot fall in the kitchen. When my stepdad got up to check it out, he heard humming behind him. Also, nothing really fell in the kitchen. Later that night, I heard something scratch one of the windows in my room 3 times. Then walk over to my other window and scratch it 3 times too. And then yesterday, my stepdad was home alone and he saw something. My cat, Ghost, ironic name, right, likes to go into what we call the playroom. He's not allowed to go in the room, but he sits at the door all the time. My stepdad was just sitting in the living room when he heard the doorknob turn. Our house is old, so the doorknobs squeak when you turn them. He saw the door open. My cat may be smart, but he can't open doors. And today, the same thing happened to me. Got sick last night, so I didn't go to school today. When I woke up, I was the only one home because my sister was at school. My stepdad was at work, and my mom was running errands. When I got up, I went to the kitchen to take some nausea medicine. My dog and my cat came to the kitchen because they thought I was getting food. While I was taking my medicine, I heard the door open, the same way that my stepdad did yesterday. My cat ran to the door, and when I went to the door, sure enough, it was cracked. I closed the door and went straight back to my room. It was so weird to me. And you might be thinking it's somebody who used to live there, but my family and my great-grandparents are the only people who've ever lived in that house. Is there a mimic in my house? So, my house was built by my great-grandparents in the 60s. My family now lives in it. It's me, my mom, my stepdad, my sister, and my stepbrother. It's every other weekend. We've lived in this house ever since my great-grandmother passed away in 2019. But these mimics started to happen recently. At first, it would be my mom calling my name. And then I'd go to it and no one is there. I'll ask her about it and she would say that she never said anything. Vice versa with her. But recently it's gotten worse. A few weeks ago I spent the night at a friend's house. When my friend dropped me off, nobody was home because my sister had a competition. My mom told me that she would stop and get me food on her way home. She called me when my stepdad pulled up in the driveway. When she was unlocking the door, she heard me tell the dogs to go back away from the door, but when she opened the door, I wasn't even in the living room. Our house is basically a very long hallway. One end is the front door, the other end is my room, so it takes me a minute to get to the front door. Even if I was heading to the front door, I wouldn't have reached it in time. My stepdad says he heard me at the door too. Then last night, my mom said she heard it again. She got up to use the restroom at what she thinks was around 2 a.m., and when she was in the bathroom, she heard me singing and walking toward the bathroom. I like to randomly burst out in song, so this isn't unusual. So she told me that she'd be out in a minute, but when she left the bathroom, I wasn't waiting on her. She looked into my room, and I was dead asleep. I don't know why this mimic likes to mimic me the most, but it is creepy. My sister says that she will hear my voice in her room a lot. My great-grandmother did pass away in the house, but I doubt it's her because this feels evil. Well, you can at least take the compliment that perhaps you're the most interesting. Now we enter Phase 2. I hope in the future to be able to speak to you, so in future episodes this should not only be my voice, but you sharing your own. Since this is my inaugural video, I guess you could call it that, and I have zero backing in any sense of the term, I'll be interviewing myself, I guess. Well, I guess less of an interview and more of a string of consciousness. I didn't write this out, but I'm going to go ahead and title it in advance. I think I'm going to call it Midnight Riders. So where I grew up, some towns have local police. I didn't necessarily have that. I lived next to a reservoir, a thing that carries clean water or non-salt water to a nearby city. So I had what was called the Department of Environmental Protection. So as a little kid, when I would walk around at night, because who doesn't like to do that, I would bump into the DEP, as I'll call it from here on, quite often. Never doing anything quote-unquote wrong, but I have done things such as pretending to be Sasquatch, which is, in retrospect, a little bit foolish, but things like that. I had a buddy at the time. I've always had at least one best friend. And we decided previously that we would meet at this dike, which is like a road that goes along a reservoir or body of water, I think. I was bringing cards, and back in that year, it was probably maybe 2002, somewhere around there. I had my backpack with my cards, a box of Pop-Tarts, which I probably shouldn't have been eating, and some sort of video game system in a backpack. So first, I ride my bike to the entrance of the dike, and at that particular year, I think 9/11 had already happened at this point, so the government was afraid of people poisoning the reservoir. So they had all these new barricades up in order to prevent cars and traffic or terrorists, at that point in time they claimed, to prevent them from going to the center of the dike and, I don't know, putting a bomb there or whatever they thought, or however that might work. So I I pedal my bike for half an hour, 40 minutes to get to this dike, and I park it in these little metal-looking, risers, I suppose, these circular columns that would come up out of the ground at a particular time at night in order to prevent these quote-unquote terrorists from entering said reservoir road. So I park my bike against one of these columns. The columns are maybe a foot and a half wide, so you could turn sideways and kind of get in there, but put my bike over there. And by the way, my friend lived on the opposite end of the reservoir, so he was going to be on the other side, and we were going to walk along this dike and meet somewhere in the middle. So picture a body of water on the left, a body of water on the right, or the outlet of said water. and then this big long road in between there. So I parked my bike against one of these columns. There's a little booth next to that, which I don't know if it was a booth for anything other than intimidation, because I've never seen anyone in this booth other than, well, me finding my way in there one time. Bad me. So I park the bike, and I'm walking along this dike. Before you hit the water, there's a little bit of a section of road with, like a landmass sort of piled up to create the dam. So think a mowed sort of lawn, which whoever mowed that was daring because it was at an incline. I always wondered how they didn't tumble down the hill, but it was huge. A whole lot of land. So before you actually hit the, dam part, the part that physically separated water on both sides, or had the outlet on one and the body of water on the other, there was this road with the landmass leading up to it. So I'm walking for 5 minutes with this backpack on along that section of road on my way toward the actual dike part. When I got to the dike part, imagine this. There's a guardrail on your left, which has the body of water that's slowly getting larger as you're walking along it. And then sort of that body of land pressing up against the dam to make the dam on the right that slowly is at a decline. So it's going downhill on your right. So it goes from tree line to air because you wind up being higher in elevation as you continue across this dike. So you're hearing water on your left, and on your right you're going from bugs and whatever might be in the woods there to just kind of wind. So I hit the actual dike, meaning there's no more sounds of any animals on my right, and the sounds of water gets louder on your left. There's these large cement, I don't really know quite what to call them, but sidewalks, I suppose, or barricades, more like it. So at about, rib cage height, if that's a measurement, you'll have, 4 foot tall cement barricades on your right and left once you get to the part of the actual dam. And these barricades, sort of on the outside, or the outermost sides of both these barricades, there's about 1.5 feet of cement block on the other side of it. So you could technically crawl over and be standing on the outside of this barricade, whether it be on the right looking down into oblivion, where some people actually had committed you-know-what, and on the left side, where you could fantasize about jumping in the water where you would not die or be hurt at all, but be greeted with state-protected drinking water. So it sounded kind of good. Anyhow, I'm at this part of the dike, about halfway down. So when you go and sort of put your back up against it and sit down, you get a funnel of sound because this thing was 4 feet tallish, like I was saying. So instead of hearing the water splashing or the wind howling with deer and whatnot below, you sort of hear a funnel of sound that's coming from the entrance to the entire road on your left and off into the darkness where you really can't see anything on your right. Where I was hoping that my buddy would be, either pedaling his bike from or walking as I was. Oops, 1 second. Helps me think. So, I'm sitting here with my back up against it, and I can hear those sounds funneling from my left and from my right. I'm waiting, and I'm listening for the bike chain of my friend in the darkness. I didn't bring a light, because, I'm not the best at thinking ahead, and, I did have that video game system that I was telling you about, a Game Boy of some kind. And I'm trying to conserve battery because I didn't even bring batteries for the thing. So I'm using the screen as a light, and I'm looking around through my backpack trying to find myself a flavor of Pop-Tarts because, of course, I brought several. And instead of hearing my buddy, I sort of notice a light It's coming from, well, at this point, straight across from me, because I have my back up against that right side wall. So I turn my Game Boy off, put my bag down, and I'm looking off across the lake. Across the lake, there's, well, an arrangement of terrain, for lack of better words. So a little bit of a mountain, a little bit of a hill, and whatever might surround a reservoir. And through the tree line, I see something that comes across to me at the time as almost like a lighthouse. Granted, there's no reason to have a lighthouse in such an area. There's no boat traffic. And it's a no-fly zone as far as I know, because, well, we're stopping terrorists with 3-foot-high metal beams. I'm assuming that airplanes aren't allowed to fly over it either. And I'm seeing this light, and it's passing easily from like a shoo, and then it would repeat again, coming from the left to the right, from, well, stage left, stage right. It's a regular color, so I'm thinking, okay, this is a car, and it's maybe passing around some sort of a road that's across the way from me, and I'm just seeing it go along this bend. Because keep in mind, it's somewhere around midnight. To avoid getting hit by a car, that's when I would drive my pedal on my bike at night. Do you drive a bike? Well, I digress. So once I see that light go by, second time, see the light go by, and that's when that lighthouse imagery kicks in for me, because I'm going, what is this for? And then this time, 4 more times, except 3 times the speed in succession. And I go, okay, well, that was weird, and I'm thinking, okay, it must just be a line of cars randomly at, 12:30 at night for no apparent reason across the dike over there, so whatever. And by the way, these were sort of 2 lakes, so if I was, or rather, whatever I was seeing across the lake didn't necessarily imply that it was coming near me. Actually, quite to the contrary, it would be going along some state route, going away from me. So I thought, okay, it's just some cars. I'm going to continue to wait for my friend. I sit back down, take out my Game Boy at the time, find my cinnamon Pop-Tarts I believe I chose. I have a weird memory, but I remember flavors well. And then I start hearing a sort of, well, rather feeling some sort of a tone. It's coming from my left, and keep in mind, my attention's been on my right. On the left shouldn't be anything other than, well, a deer, maybe, but that's sort of unheard of. So, I'm listening to the right, and yet I'm feeling this sound, and I'm hoping it's my friend, possibly. It's not. The tone starts getting louder, and it starts sort of mono-summing on itself, so you're hearing this low, droning sound. And then it starts to sort of replicate on top of itself. If you've ever had feedback from a microphone, it's a little bit like that. It didn't get to the point where it was ear-numbing, but it got to the point where it was a curiosity to a problem, you could say. So I'm looking to my left, I'm zipping up my backpack, shoving the rest of the Pop-Tart in my mouth and chewing like some sort of a gerbil. And to my left, where as far as I could know, if you saw a car passing by that road adjacent to the entrance to this dike, the car would be going past, so I was hoping I would see from far off in the distance the reflection of my blinker on my bike from the car passing by, and hoping it was just some D-bag of some sort blasting rap music or something at 12:30 at night running through the woods, because, well, I guess people like to do that. Well, instead of that, I saw a light, and it wasn't the reflector of my bike at all. It was actually what seemed like a centipede of lights, like, I don't know, a line of lights. I thought it was perhaps maybe a car with side lights on it, but I couldn't figure out how that could possibly be happening, because, well, there's those barricades that come up. Never seen them come down before, other than at 5:30 in the morning. So I'm wondering how a vehicle could be getting past here. But the noise is getting louder. The headlights are getting closer. I'm not good with metric, but, this has got to be a quarter mile down the road. that I had walked at this point, but at a straightaway, so you could see. The sound's getting louder. The vibration is getting more, so I'm beginning to think, okay, maybe the Department of Environmental Protection is running some sort of a truck through here, which at the time made me a little bit annoyed because I used to, or rather at that point in time, I suppose my parents used to use that road to get to work quicker, and I was annoyed that these guys were using the road themselves late at night. And I thought, they're coming down. It's taking a little bit longer than I was thinking, and I started to get nervous because, you know what, I'm the only guy here and it's 12:30 at night. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here if it is the Department of Environmental Protection, or at the very least, maybe they're going to question me about my Pop-Tart usage again, because this has already happened in the past. I had a list of quote-unquote offenses that were quite unoffensive, but I didn't want to talk to him, kind of a shy guy. So, these lights are getting closer and closer, and the lights that I assumed were side lights were getting further spaced apart because it was coming at maybe a 15-degree angle coming toward me on the slight bend before it hit that stone dike part, which is obviously straight to become a dam and barrier. So I actually start to panic. The noise is getting louder. It's coming across more like a Harley Davidson or a detuned engine. Well, I didn't know what it was called at that point, so I thought it was some biker people, which also didn't make sense at all. You couldn't fit a motorcycle in between those barricades. So at this point, I have conflicting thoughts going in my brain. I can't figure out if it's a truck and they put the thing down, but if it's a truck, how's it separating itself? And I kept picturing those lighthouse lights that I saw 5 minutes previously. In my panic, I don't know why, I guess since my back was up against that right side wall, I decided to throw myself and my backpack first over this little cement wall. And there's maybe that 1.5 foot space to stand. So I'm on the other side of the wall. They're halfway to me, so 1/8 of a mile they've come at this point, and I'm hearing this noise louder and louder, and it's like a low D note, almost, the sound a whale would make, but along with it, this detuned engine sound, so there was almost farts and pops, but it sounded like at least 6, because these farts and pops were almost constant, but you could hear the underlying sound with it. So my heart's beating out of my chest, out of wherever part of me it beats from. And then I hear this almost drop in volume, and I'm assuming these are some sort of a gang or something. I don't know what it is. I don't know how they got their bike through. And I hear this sort of scream, and it's not the kind of scream that would be coming from a person, let's put it that way. It sounded hollow and metallic, and it was along with these detuned engines. So I'm sitting with my back against the wall, and I'm praying to whatever the heck I might have been praying to at that point in time. And I just hear this, and then all of a sudden, all these lights go past. It still sounds like motorcycles, but with this crazy scream in front of it, that then, when the Coriolis effect kicked in, the whole note of the bikes changed half a semitone, and they're flying the opposite direction now. And I have my arms on either side of me against the cement wall, trying not to look down, because like I said, on my right or in front of me at this point was a however many foot drop that would kill you 10 times over, let's put it that way. I'm sitting there, and now I'm thinking about my friend that's supposed to have met me 15 minutes earlier, by the way. So he's supposed to be going through this hell with me, and I don't know what kept him from meeting me, but later on in the night he said, "Oops, I forgot." And I went, let me tell you something that happened to me that night. So, I don't know exactly what any of that was. Plenty of things have been told to me, and plenty of things have happened to me. That particular area was known for quite a few things. As a no-fly zone, like I might have mentioned earlier, it was a place for UFO sightings. Not that I have a firm belief on that. Flexible person, you could say. An opinionated yet flexible person. I don't know who that was. I don't know what it was. I don't know what the unearthly scream was, or why it was there. Perhaps they could have seen a slight shadow coming from me as they were driving down this road. All I know is it was at least 6 riders or 6 things driving past me. After I climbed back on to that part of the dike and I sighted down it, there's a slight bend after that, and I did see at least 3 or 4 of the separate lights turn around that bend. I was hoping to catch a glimpse of my friend, hoping that he wasn't going to get run over or, whatever could possibly happen to you from such a thing. And I was actually relieved that he wasn't anywhere to be found, but that was a weird bike ride back home, hoping that, this is before cell phones, by the way, so hoping that my friend didn't get attacked by 6 night riders of some sort. But at the same time, hoping that he saw them so I wouldn't just be here telling you guys the story without any answers. But that's my first story. Thought it was in theme with the previous posts. Phase 3. A call to the table. Do you have a story of your own you'd like me to voice for you? Do you want to have a candid conversation and meeting with me? Either anonymously or otherwise. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Please write it below. I sit with my coffee and read over comments that you guys submit on the channel that I'm mercenary for, Paranormal M, which I always look forward to. But if any of you might have noticed, I have been discouraged via management from responding back to you myself. So what you'll receive is the channel producer writing thank you or something short like that back to your comments. She's a very nice person, but not exactly personal. I'm hoping you understand there's nothing wrong with them, but at the same time, I'm wanting to interact with people who are writing genuine things. I feel compelled to have a forum where I can return that energy. So understand I will return your sentiment either during my first or second coffee of the day, or night. Also, if you have any suggestions on how to help me grow this particular channel, I am all ears. And in closing, if you happen to still be here, this is the figurative end of the road. I'm a stickler for energy and authenticity, and I'm going to send you off with an automatic writing. This is untitled and will be an open D. No matter when you hear this, I'll cover all the bases, so good morning, good evening, and good night. And most importantly, day or night, sweet dreams.